So the 2nd of January 2023. See how this goes. I haven't made any video for a few weeks, no uploads, no live stream. So yeah, I thought it was about time. But as always, I'll see how this goes. I'm gonna multitask until people drop by. Um as always, please leave a question, a comment, maybe something you want, absolutely anything in the comment section, and that's how we get this rolling. But until then, I'm just going to multitask. So, yeah. Hi, Carl. Happy New Year. So, welcome. That was quick. I thought I'd be waiting a few minutes, actually. Is audio okay? Can you hear me okay? Hi, Declan. Two guys, welcome. Happy New Year to you too. Spare email. Good. I thought I'd be waiting a few minutes. So, welcome, guys. Hope you all had a good New Year. For me, this year, I have to say, was quite quiet. I like New Year's. I like it as a sort of fresh start, but for me, it was quiet because I've had a flu for a while now. I'm finally more or less over it, but yeah, from about Boxing Day onwards, and I never get sick, so that was a bit of a nuisance. Um, I only really got over it yesterday, so New Year's Eve, I just wasn't. I was a little bit feverish. I just didn't have the energy to stay up too long. I mean, I watched the countdown, but that was it. I had COVID over Christmas. That was my first time. Sorry to hear that. Spare, that doesn't sound fun. Yeah, I had concerns. I may have had COVID. My dad basically flew, and with his job, he works with a lot of older people. So, but I still have taste, and apparently with COVID, you lose a sense of taste. So, sorry to hear that. Spare, is that bout over now, or have you been vaccinated? You heard about the COVID situation in China. I had a cold near Christmas too, and being injured from falling on my knee on ice. Ooh, that sounds nasty. Yeah, this situation in China, my students actually cancelled some of our recent lessons as a result. It seems pretty serious. I don't know what it is. It seems to be that there's no indication that it's a new strain, but I think the problem is a lot of older Chinese people aren't vaccinated, or the drugs that they're using are not quite. They're okay. They're about 70% efficiency, but not the sort of 90% that Pfizer and AstraZeneca are supposed to be around roundabouts. Um, but for whatever reason, there seems to be in Shanghai and Beijing, it seems to be really out of control. So it is concerning. I know Italy, India, Australia, a few other countries have banned Chinese travelers as a precaution. And Beijing's obviously not happy about it. But with what happened last time, I don't know. I feel sorry for individual Chinese because they may see it as being punished by nationality. But given what happened last time, I think governments are right to be cautious over it now, but taking off work went down badly. They weren't understanding. They weren't. Hmm. Can I ask what's your job, Spare? What do you do? Yeah, I mean, for me, other than this sort of flu I've had, it's. There was one day I was just shaking really badly, and I hate that. I hate feeling weak. I hate feeling that sort of that you don't have the energy to do anything. It's not a pleasant feeling because I've been pretty lucky health wise in my whole adult life. I've only been in hospital once with shingles. That was 2 years ago, so I've been pretty lucky. But yeah, I don't like that feeling of being weak. It's not pleasant, and you can't focus on anything. I returned on the 23rd of December, but was too ill to go home. Still felt lousy on Christmas Day. Retail. Hmm. Yeah, and retail, of course, would be a very busy time. So imagine that's added to pressure for yourself. Then you say that COVID pandemic would end in 23. Did I say that? I don't know. I mean, for me, it seems that I know they've stopped recording it in 22. Like there's no longer any data made available because it's kind of become, I guess, mainstream. Certainly, there's still COVID out there, but it's no longer treated, at least in this country, as I can see, as a pandemic. And really, to all extents and purposes, it's I would say it ended a year ago in this country. Yeah, I didn't have a fourth jab. I had the two main jabs plus the booster. This fourth jab, I don't know much about it. Is that like a booster jab or I know my mum sometimes talks about flu jab, but I think that's more just her age. Um, but that's like seasonal flu. Yeah, I mean it's like it's sad that people are still getting this thing. So spare, if you don't mind me asking, was it physically painful? Was it difficulty breathing? What were the symptoms that you felt, and how did you know it was COVID? Was that did you have like a testing kit or something? I mean, how did you know it was formally diagnosed as COVID? But otherwise, guys, I hope you all had a good Christmas. For me, it was relatively quiet. My little sister was yeah, she's always has health problems. I go to my family for Scotland, but probably for the last time. My parents are going to move back to Sunderland this year. Um, without going into too many details because nothing's finalised yet. But yeah, I mean it was all right. But Cuckoobury's a nice little place in the southwest of Scotland. It's a nice little place at Christmas time. They light up the fishing boats with lights and so on. It's nice. There are countries that have transition transition into endemic phase. Yeah. So something's happening in China. I mean, I don't know if it's a new strain or if it's apparently like the vaccines that were given out in China were a year ago, so it may actually be that their effectiveness is now wearing off. I don't know what the reason is why there is a sudden spike in cases again in China, but it's worth remembering there's been pandemics in history where there were waves. Um, I mean, take the Black Death for instance. It was part of the second Great um, Plague pandemic, which was really lasted for decades and decades. But that particular outbreak began roughly circa 1347 and lasted to about 1353 sporadically. So, for example, it hit Europe in around 1350, 1349. So it's sort of there was different phases. And what's forgotten about the Black Death is it ravaged Asia first. I mean, it killed millions in Asia. We tend to associate it with Europe, but it also killed millions in Asia. The Great Plague of Justinian was another one. The Spanish influenza or the 1918 influenza, 1918, but didn't really phase out until about 1921. Flu-like symptoms in bed for 2 days, groaning, felt nausea. That doesn't sound fun. I hope you're all over the worst now. Do you think experts and media are fear-mongering over new variants? Not in this country, because I think really we are past that stage now. I mean, I haven't heard even the people you would expect to be doing that, maybe medical expert type people, haven't necessarily been warning, or if they have, it hasn't got much media traction. In fact, there was that thing, Strep A, that some young children died from that. That seems to have been a concern recently, but I don't know much about that. I don't know how it's transmitted or anything. And then, of course, we have monkeypox. That seems to have kind of went off the radar again in early 22. That seemed to be the thing. Now that's gone. So honestly, I'm cautiously hopeful that we're past the worst. But the situation in China is somewhat concerning because that's how the last one began. It was just some distant pandemic in China, and it was sort of a secondary news item at that time because in early 2020, the big news story was the tensions between Iran and the United States, and it was still a secondary story. And then, of course, it became a global pandemic, and it became arguably the biggest story of our lifetimes. So I don't know. I don't think we could be complacent with this situation in China, but the difference this time, I think governments would be a lot quicker to act. Like I say, I feel sorry for individual Chinese who probably want to travel or they have family here and so on. But I do think that governments are right to be quite cautious because the Chinese government cannot be trusted to be transparent. So, had Christmas dinner and New Year's Day instead. Well, I guess that was something to look forward to. In that sense, it would be very interesting to see what happens in UK politics. Yeah, Carl. I mean, there was a op-ed in the Times about Labour's doing well, but this is the year that Labour will keep up its momentum, but they need to prove themselves in 24. I don't think we're going to see a general election this year. Rishi Sunak has absolutely no implication to call one. I mean, why would he? And to be completely honest, as much as I think there's a very good reason to vote the Tories out, I also believe in stability, and I wouldn't want to see a situation where Sunak leaves office after just a few months at the helm, because stability is something that resonates beyond our shores. And if we get a situation where we keep rotating prime minister, we'll start to look politically weak. And we can no longer make fun of the Italians because they're actually more stable at the moment. So um, I say that because I know I think it was the Economist got in hot water for doing this caricature of Britain with spaghetti around. It was sort of a slightly crude attempt at saying we're now the new Italy, but Italy protested about that, saying own your own problems, and they may have a point. So I don't think there's going to be a general election this year. I say let's give Sunak a chance. You know, the idea was because he's really rich and he's a Tory, he would pander to the rich. It hasn't necessarily happened that way. But the big test for Sunak is going to be these strikes. Now, my own feeling on them is somewhat mixed. I believe in the right to strike. I believe in trade unionism. I mean, without it, there would be no one to stand up for basic, yeah, rights at work. That's a very fundamental thing. At the same time, I would sort of go with what a lot of the public would would there be this hierarchy of who deserves sympathy and who doesn't. I think most people are sympathetic to the nurses. Trained staff, I'm not so sure about. If we're talking low level staff, maybe, but trained drivers get 50,000 a year. Yes, it's a lot of responsibility, but anyone that can't live on 50,000 a year, um, I don't have much sympathy for them. I mean, the other thing about railways in this country is they're notoriously unreliable. Rising prices, I mean, there's just not value for money, and long suffering commuters are fed up with it. If we look at Japan, I mean, if a train is 1 minute late there, this may be a bit of an exaggeration, but apparently managers come out and personally apologize. You would never see that in Britain. And I always think it's ironic that the country that invented railways, you know, it would be wrong to say we're the worst system in the world, but Signal and Railways job £100,000. I didn't even know that. I mean, yeah, they have a lot of responsibility and there's pressure on them. I get that, but this is not from they're struggling to get by, and I think people take a dim view of that because, and frankly, I think some people are jumping on the bandwagon at this point. Who isn't striking? I saw a cartoon in the Times over Christmas. It showed a group of Santa Clauses on strike. Why not everyone else's? Um, Nurses, I do have genuine sympathy for because it's one thing I didn't like when Sunak was Chancellor. That pathetic 1% pay rise. Given what they went through during the pandemic, I really think that was an insult. I think they should get quite a hefty pay rise, um, not just for the financial side of it, but as a mark of respect for what they do. So I definitely think most people are sympathetic to the nurses, but this thing about you know, I do think some of the union bosses are motivated by class war and that sort of politics. And the thing is, it's not it's not the wealthy that are impacted by this; it's ordinary people. Now, having said that, so yeah, I am critical of some of these union bosses, but at the same time, I think it is grotesque that some of the CEOs of these railway companies are on the sort of pay packages that they are. And I know it's not the public sector, but really it's they're making more than the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Regional railway directors for some of these companies, Network Rail, I believe, are making more than the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, which is a disgrace. And then they have the gall to put up prices. My fundamental feeling is that most railway companies in Britain have a bad attitude to customers. They'll put on their seasonal offers and so on, but generally speaking, take for example when a train breaks down, there's a lack of information. They'll just leave everyone off at the station. There's no information about replacement buses. Uh, my dad makes a point, and I agree with him, that people will put up with delays. They'll put up with that, but what they cannot stand is a lack of information. So, if you're going to dump someone off at a station because a train has failed, at least give them the information about what they're going to do. Are they going to be put on a hotel? Are they going to be given replacement buses? Things like that. Hi, Wally. Welcome, Paul. Do you think Sunak wants to take on the unions in the spirit of Thatcher? I think that's sort of a dream of every Conservative Prime Minister. I think he does, and I think that I mean he's not a Thatcherite. Sunak's relatively centrist, but I think that there will be increasing pressure, maybe from backbenchers and Tory members, to do so. And frankly, on some level, there's some vindication for that, because I do think some of these hard left unions are. I mean, like I say, I'm not anti-trade union. I do think there is a purpose in trade unions, and I would never ever support something like let's ban trade unions. That would be appalling. Trade unions do serve a purpose, but I think someone like Mick Lynch is ideologically motivated. I think someone like Mick Lynch is he just wants ideological war with the Tories. Even if they were given a generous pay package, I mean, as the Prime Minister says, they've rejected the findings of independent review. So I don't know. This isn't something I follow extensively, but I sort of I just think that it's kind of two things at play. I mean, on one hand, there may be conditions going on that we don't know about, that maybe there is ongoing grievances that people have a right to strike over. But some of the pay that these people get, if you cannot get by on 50,000, 100,000 a year, that's really telling. Um, so I'm against those sort of wildcat strikes, and I think it's the public that are impacted by it. Having said that, I would like to see the papers scrutinise some of the greedy fat cats running these railway companies a lot more. And basically name and shame them, because it may be the private sector, but they're justifying raising prices, and they say, oh, it's a historic. Um, what is it they say? Historic works in the system, historic overhaul of the system. But okay, so if they're justifying prices, they could freeze their own wages. They could freeze their own salaries. They could refuse to take bonuses. Will they do that? I hear about Tories wanting to privatise the NHS. Yeah, that certainly would be a Tory thing. I definitely would be uneasy with that. I mean, I don't think we'll ever have an American system. I don't think it will ever be entirely privatized, but I think that it's something I'd be wary of. I mean, the thing is, it's often said about the NHS, yeah, it has a lot of problems. We hear about waiting lists, we hear about people, elderly people trapped in their homes, and they, aren't seen for hours and hours, and these nightmare stories that come through. And it is a disgrace. But I think morale is very low in the NHS. I think that is why this is one sector that really, really needs to be tackled. The morale of staff is, it's not something I envy. I would not want to be a doctor or a nurse right now. But that's something that really needs to be tackled. But I mean, the thing about privatization, I'm not necessarily against it. If people want to pay for private healthcare, they should be given the option to do so. But we must never have a situation where basically healthcare becomes about money. I think healthcare is a human right, and I don't think that it should be a case of, this idea of an American system whereby, let's say you're in a road accident, and they'll treat you and they'll do a good job, but then you're given a bill at the end of it. That's just very un-British. It's very, to me, that's something that we should never ever go down that path. I mean, I've heard in the States they'll give you a check, right? So an expectant mother, she'll get a check at the end of it, and there'll literally be things like mother to child touch $20. In other words, for the mother to hold the child, that's $20. That's no exaggeration. You literally see bills like that in the States. And that's not something I think we should ever replicate. But I think if people want to pay for private healthcare, they should be given the choice to do so. But in terms of privatizing the whole system, no way. I'd be very, very wary about that. I think the answer is putting more resources into the NHS. I think morale is very low, and that's something that needs to be tackled. But the truth is, it's the country's biggest employer. It's never, ever going to be perfect. There's always going to be challenges in the NHS. Hi Nathan, do you think strikes work? I think the government should help the workers who are on the strike, like Royal Mail and NHS and other workers. I don't know if you've just joined, Ray, but I've just been talking about this for the last 5 minutes. Um, like I say, it really depends on the workers. I don't think it's all. I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think the public are very sympathetic to healthcare workers. I am. Railway workers, I'm not so sure about. Royal Mail, I don't know. I don't know enough about that. But the reason I think people have limited sympathy for railway workers is because their pay is pretty good to begin with. And also, it's a system that most people think is not good value for money. Tickets are ever getting ever higher. There's constant delays, and now strikes on top of that. I think that they need to understand the optics of it. But what I've been saying, Ray, is that I believe in the right to strike. I believe in trade unionism, but I think at the same time, some union bosses are ideologically motivated. Um, yeah, I agree. I agree, Carl. That's pretty much. I think most people would say that's a reasonable proposition. But that's my position, Ray. I think that it really depends. I don't think it's one size fits all. I think it depends on the particular workers. I do think some people are jumping on the bandwagon a bit. Um, I feel, I mean, there's speculation that we're on the path to a general strike, which, unless I'm mistaken, it would be the first full national general strike since 1926, if I've got that right. I know there was a lot of strikes in the 70s, but I don't know if any of them was a general strike. And that would be really saying something. Um, I mean, what the government's saying is the union bosses, have ignored the findings of the independent pay review bodies. So I don't know. I mean, the thing is, behind the scenes, these are often very complex negotiations. So who knows? There may be a lot of details that those of us who aren't directly involved in this don't know. There may be things going on behind the scenes that we don't know. But I think that strikers in general need to understand public optics. And I think if you're on 50,000 a year and you're going on strike, you're not going to get much public sympathy. Yes, it's a pressurizing job. Yes, it's a job of responsibility. But that's like, I mean, 50,000 is like a doctor's salary. It's a decent wage. It really is. If someone can't live on that, I mean, that's ridiculous. But there may be other issues. It may not just be pay. It may be pressure, or who knows. But I do feel problem, because then you would have a situation where all sorts of, I mean, look at what happens in Amazon. The Amazon warehouses, the notoriously bad working conditions that they face. So, I sort of left wing side of me would be definitely sympathetic to improving workers' conditions. But I guess the right wing side of me is thinking, I don't want to see, unions so powerful that they just strike over the drop of a hat, because then the country comes to a gridlock and they could just blackmail the government. I don't agree with that, because it's the public that suffer. Um, I mean, in a sense, as kind of back to traditional politics, left versus right. We've a conservative right wing government, we've left wing trade unions. So it's kind of politics as normal in a sense, in that way. But my dad came and picked me up over Christmas. We drove to Scotland. He was, I'm very grateful that he done that, because if I tried to get a train, I would have been sitting in Carlisle for hours. Anyway, the knee injury and Cole was really shitty. Could barely walk for a couple of days and really deprived my sleep. Did you break anything, Declan? Did you actually break your knee or fracture your knee? Sounds bad. I heard today actually the actor Jeremy Renner. I don't know if you guys know him. Apparently, he's in serious condition. He injured himself scooping snow. The Canadian actor. Don't know if you heard about that. First class stamps are expensive, but Royal Mail moving away from that and wants only parcels. Only you mean only? Oh, you worked as a postman for 18 months. There was a strike. I wasn't involved, but I was having to deliver it on foot at Christmas time as late as 10 p.m. Imagine that was difficult. Yeah, I mean, I could certainly see from postal workers, for example. I think it can be a difficult job. And then talking of that, this is kind of going off. It's not quite on the main subject, but recently there was footage of this postman being attacked by a little dog. Now, and he sort of kicked it in reflex, and people say, "Oh, what a terrible guy!" Blah blah blah. But I'm thinking, well, really, the onus is on dog owners to, you know, make to maintain their pets. It really bugs me when people just let their pets just run wild. And, you know, someone has a right to protect themselves, small dog or not. If a dog's attacking you from behind, your knee-jerk response is going to be to lash out. So people in this country especially have a slightly dewy-eyed attitude when it comes to animals, and not always consider their fellow human beings. But yeah, I'm pleased you mentioned that, Sperry Mill, because you raise a good point. I mean, I don't know if that's what this particular strike's about conditions or about pay, but it is worth bearing in mind that postal workers do work in sometimes quite challenging conditions. So I think definitely that's something that, and I don't know what the sort of salary is. I've heard people talk about Brexit and its consequences recently. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think we've heard nothing but Brexit for what, 6 years. So I don't really care about Brexit anymore, to be quite honest. Um, I mean, I think we're at a point now where it's done, and it's like the Northern Ireland Protocol, of course, hasn't been settled. But personally, my own feeling, I just have very little interest in Brexit. My gut feeling is it was a mistake, quite honestly. I don't think it was the disaster that Remainers made it out to be necessarily, but I certainly don't think it was, the land of promise that the Leave people were promising it would be. Like they were really hyping it up. But I honestly think I don't like thinking about Brexit. Even I think it was fundamentally divisive, and I think that it's good that the dust will somewhat settle now. I think it's good that it's no longer in political discourse. Put it that way. I'm not saying it's not important. Of course, it's important, but I just think it was something that it just proves that referendums are fundamentally not good, because far from direct democracy, all they do is cause more divisions. Um, was attacked by a dog 3 times. Damn, that ever was that what is was that ever serious? You were bitten. I mean, I'd be pissed off, quite frankly, if owners aren't controlling their pets. Um, The woman would leave the door open. Dog bit me in the leg, so after that I carried a riding crop. I would not use it though, just to deter. Then the woman whose dog bit me said she would use it on me. Cheeky cow. Sorry, but that's um. Were you protected by any sort of like I don't know, if you were bit, for example, would the post office have stood up for you and said we expect our workers to be safe doing their job? I think that's a disgrace. I mean, it's these people who can't control their pets. They remind me of these parents who think their little child could never do any wrong. It's really pathetic. Um, JX, welcome, welcome. Happy New Year to you too. Sorry, guys, I've just spilled some coffee. I'll just be a minute. Don't think so. I just sprained it. It was swollen much better now. Still a bit stiff going upstairs. And please, it's okay, guys. So Fred's moving quite fast, so just bear with me a second. I went on antibiotics for one bite. That's really bad. I mean, I would actually, I would have. I mean, I know it's easier to say, "Oh, I would have done this," but if she was that rude, I would have said, "Okay, I'm not delivering to your house anymore." You know, that's disgraceful. Happy New Year, DMD. Welcome. Postmaster didn't care. That's a disgrace. Ray, um, do you GB News? I think you've missed a word there. Do you GB News is like a Fox News type, and what do you think of GB News? What they talk about mostly talk about illegal immigration. Would you say it's a good thing? Um, so I don't have access to GB News. It's one of those subscription channels, but I've seen quite a lot of it on YouTube. I think that they've really made this thing of saying we're not the British Fox News, but frankly, I think they are. If I'm being honest, I think they are. Now, some of it I think is refreshing. They do address, for example, woke nonsense that you will never see on the BBC or even Sky News. So they do address things like that I think need to be challenged and brought up. Um, and I think they have some decent journalists. Um, I forget all the names now. I haven't watched it for a little while, but sometimes they have good, thoughtful pieces. Unfortunately, they're not really dissuading this stereotype that they are a little bit shouty and a little bit like the thing is, as much as I think woke ideology should be challenged robustly, they have to be more than that. They have to be more than just this is wokeism, and they have to be more than just taking the Mickey out of wokeism. Um, Sometimes I know they've had some technical problems in certain segments, like but they're setting up. So I suppose we can let them off with that because it's still a relatively new network. Um, I feel the same way. I don't know why they don't call themselves UK News, like Team GB. Why not Team UK? It's just a little thing I've got. I mean, the UK is the whole country, so but overall, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of it, because I think they are definitely biased to the right. I don't think they can honestly say that they're middle ground. They're not. They're definitely biased to the right, and sometimes it's a little bit of a shock jock thing going on. But having said that, there's things about them that like I say, they do challenge woke ideology, and they do challenge the hypocrisy of that sometimes. Um, in terms of things like illegal immigration, that's totally a legitimate topic to talk about. The problem is if they just become pinned down to one subject, they will be typecast as just a reactionary right wing network. I don't think they necessarily are. I think that's a very legitimate thing to talk about. And I think it's important to have a balance because, the likes of the BBC will never talk about certain subjects. I mean, the BBC is less likely to talk, for example, about the problem with grooming gangs and things like that. GB News will. Um, so it's good to have a balance, a counterbalance to that, to ensure that these things are discussed in public domain. But I think sometimes it's a little bit shouty and a little bit, I don't know, predictable, perhaps predictable. Another thing I didn't like about GB News is much like Sky News Australia, they were a little bit too cozy around the whole Donald Trump cult. Allowing themselves to then start getting partisan about American politics. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump is a disgrace. He's a threat to democracy. I don't think he should be anywhere near the White House again. So if GB News is going to say, well, we're going to prop up the Trump cult by, pushing out his propaganda just because we don't like Biden and we don't like wokeism. I would definitely draw questions on that. But anyway, like I said, I don't watch it regularly, so I can't comment too much. But I think broadly speaking, it's good that people have different perspectives. Even if it is biased to the right, okay, it's biased to the right. Well, the BBC is biased to the left. So it's a balance. But I certainly don't agree with all their editorial positions. Carl, Northern Ireland Protocol is still an issue here, as the DUP are boycotting Stormont until its change is scrapped. The government should respect the vote for Brexit, however, we should be like Norway, outside the EU but still in the single market and customs union. The Norway model could probably help the UK by bringing back freedom of movement. GB News is on Freeview, not on my TV. I don't know what it is. To be honest, I think I've just got an old TV. I mean, I used to have like the Sky News box thing, and I'd have all sorts of international channels. I'd have France 24, Al Jazeera, GB News, but for some reason when I click it on, it's just like a blank screen. I think I need a new TV, to be honest. Yeah, I usually watch it on when I do watch it, it's on YouTube. Notice Nigel Farage is often on it. Piers Morgan also set up a similar platform called Piers Morgan Uncensored. Yeah, Farage, I mean, this is a guy he's had a huge influence on British politics. I don't think we could deny that. But again, way too cozy to Donald Trump for my liking. And just, I mean, the thing is, sometimes these right wing guys, they'll talk a lot about left wing bias, and yes, that's there. But I remember when Farage came to Sunderland, and he had this like supposedly impartial audience. Well, okay, Sunderland voted to leave, so maybe that was just the genuine sentiments of that audience. But the whole room was like, arch Brexiteers, and it was just predictable. It was some working men's club here, and it was just. I'm thinking, is that really a representative picture, or is it like, I don't know. I was a little bit skeptical. In fairness, I watch all the news channels. Yeah, it's good to have a different perspective. I mean, I watch what I've got, which at the moment is Sky News, BBC, CNN, Euronews. Don't have much more actually. TRT, which is a Turkish channel of all things. Um, I even watched RT when it was on, although I despised it. And I'm pleased it left our shores, which is absolutely the right decision. But I even watched that when it was on for see what their latest propaganda was. I agree. A lot of the problems the UK is currently facing is down to the lack of freedom of movement. Hi Nathan, you good? Have you been on holiday? Hi Tomo, welcome and happy New Year. Yeah, I was with my parents for Christmas in Scotland. Just come back a few days ago. It's not necessarily your TV. It's probably down to the signal in your area. My TV doesn't always pick up the TV multiplexes. The thing is, I used to have it, so I don't know what's happened. Um, in fact, you know what? I could probably show you directly, give you an idea of what I'm talking about. But the general quality, the color and all isn't good anyway. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to show you directly. That might be the easiest way. Carl, do you think we are too obsessed with American culture, too obsessed by American culture, and how certain people want to copy everything America does? On some level, yeah. I think we sometimes a little bit of an obsession, even in the British press. There's a lot of focus on American politics. I don't know, maybe a little bit, maybe a little bit. Extent, for example. Okay, just bear with me. I'm going to show you the issue I have with this. Okay, so I've got a Sky News control. Like I said, it's pretty old. It's like a Sky box set thing. Okay, so here we go. I'll go to the news networks. So you see all channels. Now go down to news. I trust you guys can still hear me. Right, I'll show you what I've got exactly. Okay, so Sky News. Yes, I think many more people to have come, like Neymar, for example. Bloomberg no longer have.
because on top of everything else,
So it's
they can
BBC,
hit the
BBC
appreciation of
Parliament,
the dollar.
CNBC.
People inside the
I'll
bank.
put it on mute because that's uh that's the live. Still got CNN, NHK. This is a Japanese channel. Used to have this. It's gone now. Yeah, it's giving me a phone number. Call for further information on how to receive this high definition channel, which I used to have. Euronews still have. NDTV, that's another one. New Delhi Television, that's an Indian channel. I've got that. That's France 24, Al Jazeera. So that gives you an idea. Okay. So Welsh Cowboy, that just gives you an idea of what I've got. Okay, Tomo, have you seen the expose documentary on Jeremy Carroll on the show? Watched some of it, just showing how disingenuous and sly that show was. I haven't. I think I heard about that. I'm pleased he's being exposed, but I probably won't watch it because I kind of it'll just piss me off too much, too depressing. I mean, I spent a long time. I made a number of videos. I even had a Facebook group at one point against that show, and I spent a lot of energy. And so when it finally ended, I thought, good riddance. So I'm pleased it's being exposed, and I hope. But what bothers me though is the fact that Kyle can still get work and still get his hundreds of thousands. He's not blacklisted. He's not. Um, and although I don't necessarily agree with cancel culture, this is one guy I think does not deserve a platform. And it's the cynical side of entertainment that someone who was associated with that sort of sick show and all the corruption that went on in it, that he can still get work, he could still get whatever it is he's doing now. It kind of disgusts me. That looks like FreeSat rather than Freeview. Ah, right, maybe I'm getting them mixed up. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. To be honest, I've had it for years. Doesn't say on the box. Yeah. What's the main difference, Welsh Cowboy? What would be the main difference? I do actually have a channel called, as you can see, GB News there. Can't get GB News. TRT World, that's a Turkish network of all things. In fact, I think they're covering the Chinese case here. I'll just show you guys this report since we were talking about it anyway.
He explains whether the new measures will make a difference.
Of course, it's one of these areas where it's a trade-off. I think there is a good argument for screening travellers before they depart. That's pre-departure testing. It has two benefits. It reduces the number of infected people.
Yeah, they're talking about screening passengers from China, so that'll be the next thing. Right, let's see. Yeah, he doesn't deserve a platform on GB News, I think, or that talk thing. Yeah, it's talk radio. Well, certainly, I'll say this: if GB News give Kyle a platform, it will certainly lower my opinion of them. The thing is, right? People say, "Oh, what about free speech?" Well, yeah, free speech is great; everyone has it, but that doesn't mean you give people a platform. I mean, that's one thing about this debate because there's cancel culture, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that doesn't mean you give people a platform. Someone as controversial as Kyle. I think any radio station or talk radio, I think it was, and that's why I sort of, I guess, boycott them because just because there's free speech doesn't mean you give someone a platform that others don't have. I mean, Kyle does not deserve it. I actually was tempted to call up his show under the guise of some other subject, and then I don't know, kind of take him on unaware, like how do you sleep at night, Jeremy, or something like that. But I've no credit on my phone at the moment, and I don't know, about it. Just reading the headline at the bottom there: Government killed more than a dozen people in attack on northern Mexico prison. Multiple casualties reported in explosion outside Kabul military airport. Honestly, a few days into the new year already, war continues. But there are good points about America. I just let's see, just following the track here. I don't just want to be negative about it. Of course, Carl, I agree. I mean, there's some things about the states I think I would actually like to implicate. In terms of their legal system, I think it's more transparent than ours. Quite frankly, in America, judges can be recalled, judges can be elected. I honestly think we're at a point where I'm not necessarily calling for British judges to be elected, but I do think they should be a lot more subject to scrutiny. A lot more. I mean, in America, if you have a judge that makes a bad decision, he or she will be recalled, basically, much like an elected politician. I think here the public have no power, none. I think that's wrong because they're in a position of power. They're making decisions on people's lives. Hi Nathan, do you still watch WWE? And if so, who's your favorite wrestler? I could say my favorite wrestler would be John Cena. He works hard in the ring and out of the ring. I do occasionally. In fact, you may well have just put me in the mood for watching it tonight because I have no plans for anything to watch tonight. So I love the Royal Rumble. I mean, the thing is with WWE, I was really into it around the Attitude Era, and I sort of trailed off for most of the 2000s and the 2010s. I started getting back into it in the late 2010s. Um, my favorite wrestler, I mean, Rock, yeah, probably The Rock. I'm going to give a boring answer, but there was something about his charisma and his in-ring skills. I just guy, and he's become one of the biggest entertainers on the planet since. But what I loved about the Attitude Era was the intro songs. I don't know if you remember Ray Too Cool, Scotty Too Hotty, Rikishi Fatu, and Grandmaster Sexay. That really cool sort of intro song they had, and the Hardy Boys. Really like the Hardy Boys. Who else? Edge and Christian. Quite a big fan of Edge and Christian. But favorite wrestler? None at the moment. None at the precise moment. I actually know a wrestler. Well, not now, but I did. She was Sarah Jones. She works on the independent circuit. Um, I used to go with her, and yeah, she was really skilled, and she doesn't look like she didn't necessarily look like a wrestler. A really beautiful girl. She didn't look like what some people might, I guess, imagine a female wrestler is like, but she was very skilled, and she's now on the independent circuit. Um, there's a buzzing noise I keep hearing. Yeah, sorry about that, Carl. Sometimes it comes up. I'll try and lift the. Hopefully, it's gone now. Um, who's your? Oh, you mentioned John Cena. Yeah, I mean Cena's one of those guys. I sort of think of generations. If we think like, okay, so you have the '80s Hulk Hogan, the '90s Hulk Hogan as well, then the late '90s, early 2000s, The Rock. It's sort of these generations of top wrestlers. Then John Cena. Then who now? Roman Reigns, I guess. There's just different eras where there's like a top dog or top baby face, I guess. Although I think I haven't kept up to date with kayfabe. What I do like is WrestleLamia. Do you ever watch that, Ray or Rick? Or do you ever watch Behind the Titantron? That could be really interesting. Some of the conspiracy theories and some of the mysteries behind the wrestling world. Better Days, welcome. Best Royal Rumble was 2001. Yeah, that was a classic. That was a good year. I remember that one. 1992, which was one of the first, I believe, was also a very good one. And they say 96 was a good one. In recent years, I think 2010 was quite good. Well, relatively recent. I got one at CEX, a discount shop, 2021. I think it was. No, maybe I'm getting. There was one of the recent ones was quite good. Okay. I think I've got the 2001 Royal Rumble recorded somewhere, and that's going back like 21, 22 years now. But I always like the Royal Rumble. I think the thing about the Royal Rumble, it's also a good introduction to wrestling for people who maybe don't follow professional wrestling. It's a good way to kind of introduce the big names of the day. And yeah, I love Royal Rumbles. But I always think of that Attitude Era, like Kane, The Undertaker, then guys like that, The Rock, Kurt Angle, Steve Austin, of course, Goldberg, guys like Vizera, who are now gone. Good memories, Sometimes, of course, the kayfabe could get really ridiculous, but do you think Trump will return to power, as it looks like Ron DeSantis could take the Republican nomination? I'm going to make a prediction about the next election. I think Trump's going to run, Biden's going to run, but I think America will reject both of them. I think Trump just has far too many legal things over him, and not that will stop his supporters trying to galvanize him, but I think what they may say is, well, let's have Ron DeSantis. He's basically Trump without the legal baggage. I actually think we could have a situation of Ron DeSantis versus Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. I think the Democrats will also pressure Biden to step down because of his age, and because he's got a relatively lackluster performance. So I can actually see a situation where something happens where two young candidates take over, and it will be Gavin Newsom of California versus Ron DeSantis of Florida. I think if it's Trump versus Biden again, that would be unfortunate because it would be they're two old men, and I think um, Biden's not a terrible president, but I think he sometimes his age shows, and I think that could be an issue. But I don't think Trump should be anywhere near the White House. Better days. 2021 was like a street fight in the match. They don't use no disqualification. Though the 2021, that would have been the one where they had like that big screen thing with all the audience in the little boxes, because of course it was still the pandemic rules. There's a Scottish guy in wrestling now, Drew McIntyre. He's made quite a big name for himself. He's from Ayr, not too far from my parents. I'm going to watch wrestling tonight. You guys have put me in the mood for it. Go stick on a Royal Rumble. I think I've got the 2021 event, but I do have a number of things to do first. I've got a newspaper backlog. I got the Times today because I like to read obituaries, and of course Pope. Two big names have passed away. Of course, Pope Benedict XVI, and in journalism, Barbara Walters. And I've just read something. Extinction Rebellion gives up on protests. How nice of them. How nice of them. Of course, not a word of remorse. It's a good thing. I mean, they'll finally stop pissing the public off, but, they deserve absolutely zero credit. But I always get the Times. I mean, they have big write-up on the pontiff. He's the only pope I've directly seen. I'm not a Catholic, but I am fascinated by the history of the Vatican and the history of popes. And then there's a piece here also on Barbara Walters, trailblazing journalist. I mean, she interviewed every modern American president. Okay, guys, I'm going to round this up soon, but it's been a good session, so thanks everyone for coming by. And yeah, I think I've got that Better Days of 2021 Rumble. Yeah, so I think I'll have a look at that if I've got it or something else. I'm going to get dinner now, guys. So thanks for your time. Happy New Year, and I'll end on a positive note. For me personally, 1993, 2003, 2013 were all good years. 1993, I was only 8, but I remember Jurassic Park. I remember my 8th birthday was good. I just remember it as being a good year. I remember 2003, I went to this international youth camp in the Netherlands, made some lifelong friends there, and that was good. And 2013 was the year I went to China, and it was a great experience. So 3 years ending in 3, I remember well. So hopefully the trajectory will continue, and 23 will be a good year. And I wish for all of you guys personally, it's good as well. Whatever hopes you have, I hope they come true. And stay safe. And until next time, thank you all again for your support. I really appreciate it. And thanks for your time. Okay, guys, have a good evening. And thanks a lot. Take care.